him. Okay. So hello, everyone. Welcome to this 5th webinar on a treatise on cosmic fire. By the way, this splash screen that I show as you're coming in, I'm going to be trying to, at least for as long as I can, show different photos of Alice Bailey here on the right. And a big shout out to Rose Bates, who through her research has made available photos that basically were unknown to the world before she got into it. And this is one of those early photos of her and Foster Bailey, you know, her devoted husband, who also wrote a number of really good theosophical books. But anyway, this webinar series, as you all know by now, is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars up here. Then webinar series in progress, and this changes according to what's going on at the time. Right now, there are the 3 webinars I host, and then Nicole Racenti's Esoteric Healing Services, which is also ongoing. All episodes of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages, and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. This is especially useful if you want to study one of the readings that we do, which often we don't have the time to go back and really analyze the secondary readings. And so that's a good way to do it. Okay. During our last session, we took a look at the last of the 8 statements in the section by that name, 8 statements, which focused on the death process, the law of abstraction, and the 2 fires associated with matter, prana, and the latent fire within every atom of substance. We then considered the 3 points of exit at death, the head and heart, the head, heart, and solar plexus. Then we took a look at the spleen and the splenic center before moving into the subject of planetary death, the moon, the shift from one chain to the next, and the abstraction of a solar logos through the in-breath. Finally, ending the 8 statements, the 8th statement with a discussion on pralaya, the quote, silence of the high places. Next, we started the 2nd chapter on the etheric body and prana, called The Nature of Prana, which opens with a focus on the prana of a human being. And it includes these 3 sections: solar prana, planetary prana, and the prana of forms. Then we took a quick look at aura photography of Christina Lonsdale, which brings us to where we left off last time. So could we get a reader for this first passage?
Yes. Andrea.
Yes. Do you want me to read?
Please.
Sorry, I just jumped in. Phenomena are occurring all the time, which remain in the domain of the supernatural, unless accounted for through the medium of etheric matter. And in their anxiety to prove the spiritualists wrong, scientists have aided the cause of the true and higher spiritism by falling back on reality and on the fact of the etheric body, even though they consider it a body of emanative radiation, being concerned with the effect and not having yet ascertained the cause. Medical men are beginning to study, blindly as yet, the question of vitality, the effect of solar rays upon the physical organism, and the underlying laws of inherent and radiatory heat. They are beginning to ascribe to the spleen functions hitherto not recognized, to study the effect of the action of the glands and their relation to the assimilation of the vital essences by the bodily frame.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, anytime you have a question or comment, just raise your hand. I'll occasionally ask for questions and comments, but you don't have to wait for me to ask. Anytime you just raise your hand. Okay, first up, phenomena are occurring all the time, which remain in the domain of the supernatural, unless accounted for through the medium of etheric matter. There's a very cool article on forcefultranquility.com. The link is in your chat box, and I recommend taking a further look. And it's called "This is What Prana Feels Like: Testimonials of Real Yogis," in which yoga practitioners and teacher Christian Mullenhoff asked 76 experienced yoga practitioners a number of specific questions about their experiences of prana during their practice. As shown here, 96% of respondents had felt sensations of prana. 70% of the respondents felt prana often or always during their practice. The author conducted a series of in-depth interviews exploring how and where yoga practitioners feel prana. This chart is just a sample of Christian's results. To explore this further, check out the link in your chat box. But you see, prana was so common that they could break it down to all these areas in which prana was experienced, right? Interesting to look at the top contendants here. We have the eyebrow center, which of course is the third eye, above the perineum, middle of the head, that would be the pineal gland, top of the head center, the hands, of course, we know there are centers there. Yeah, it's just the whole spine, right? So yeah, it's really fascinating study, and it just, it just shows how common the experience of energy outside of what we call normal physical energy is experienced by people. Okay, next. And their anxiety to prove the spiritualists wrong, and in their anxiety to prove the spiritualists wrong, scientists have aided the cause of the true and higher spiritism by falling back on reality and on the fact of the etheric body. Okay, spiritualists were and are mostly interested in phenomena. There was and probably still is a lot of fraudulent practice, but even genuine practitioners were often beset with various ill effects, including devitalization resulting from contact with the shells of disincarnate beings, because that's what you contact. You don't contact the whole being. You contact that which is closest to incarnation, still dissolving, which is the least quality aspect of the being who has gone on. So it is a very definitely not a recommended practice. And in fact, in India, they look on this whole thing with horror, this Western idea with horror. I don't think it's as popular now as it was in the turn of the last century, but it's still a practice. So for this reason, DK distinguishes spiritualists from the, quote, cause of true and higher spiritism, a specific philosophical doctrine established in France in the 1850s. And it has a lot of parallels. I didn't look into it too much, but it has a lot of parallels with Theosophy and with the ancient wisdom teachings. And it doesn't focus so much on the phenomena of doing things like raising a table, you know. Okay, next. Even though they, scientists, consider it a body of emanative radiation, being concerned with the effect and not having yet ascertained the cause. Unfortunately, since these words were written, scientific recognition of the etheric body is almost nil. It's really fallen away. Though there is an increasing level of public awareness, since many spiritual doctrines recognize the existence of the etheric body and of prana in general. And so it's coming in through that means rather than through science. Next, medical men are beginning to study, blindly as yet, the question of vitality, the effect of solar rays upon the physical organism, and the underlying laws of inherent and radiatory heat. Okay, modern science does recognize certain benefits from solar exposure, though they certainly don't ascribe it to prana or the etheric body. Chief among these being the assimilation of vitamin D, which has dramatic benefits, including stronger bones, reduced inflammation. There have also been studies that definitively link improved mental health, higher quality sleep, and lower blood pressure with exposure to the sun. Now, it seems so obvious that all these are the results of prana, but because prana isn't objectively measurable, science is yet to recognize this fundamental reality. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, next, they are beginning to ascribe to the spleen functions hitherto not recognized, to study the effect of the action of the glands and their relation to the assimilation of the vital essences by the bodily frame. Modern science recognizes the importance of the spleen, but not for the more esoteric reasons that DK suggests. Here's a short list of the spleen's benefits, according to modern medicine. Quote, the spleen filters blood by removing cellular waste and getting rid of old or damaged blood cells. It makes white blood cells and antibodies that help you fight infection and maintains a level of fluid in your body. My guess is that all of this is made possible by the fact that it is an organ of pranic reception. And so these, again, are just the effects of that pranic reception, but they definitely are very real effects. Okay, next up. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yeah, and Veronica.
Hello.
Hi, Anne. Veronica, how are you?
Hi.
Great. Could you read for us?
Yes. They are on the road, and before long, perhaps within this century, the fact of the etheric body and its basic function will be established past all controversy, and the whole aim of preventative and curative medicine will shift to a higher level. All we can do here is to give simply and in a condensed form a few facts which may hasten the day of recognition and further the interest of the true investigator. Let me therefore briefly state what will be dealt with in our remaining 3 points. The function of the etheric body its relation to the physical during life, the ills or diseases of the etheric body, taking care to retain the original meaning of the word disease, its after-death condition. This will embody all that is as yet of practical use. More may later be forthcoming for our helping if that which is now given to the public is carefully followed up, and if investigators wisely, sanely, and broadly study this important matter.
Thank you, Aunt Veronica. Okay,
Thank you.
first up, DK's optimistic prediction that science would recognize the etheric body during the last century. So though many more people in the West have embraced Eastern philosophy, like the yoga practitioners interviewed on forcefultranquility.com, science as yet has not come on board. It looks like this unfolding of awareness is happening through the general public, the thinkers of our race who explore the ancient wisdom teachings and practices like Buddhism and Hinduism, yoga, etc., and not so much through the scientific community. The rest of this passage introduces 4 aspects of the etheric body that will be covered during the coming section, right? And they are the functions of the etheric body, its relations to the physical during life, the ills or diseases of the etheric body, and its after-death condition. You know, a lot of these may seem familiar. We covered aspects of all these subjects in our reading so far. But he approaches them from a different direction, which is often DK's way. He lays one layer upon the other, almost like varnish, you know, and just mini coats, gradually building up our understanding. Okay, can we get a reader for this next section?
Yes. Eleonora, can you read?
Yeah, sure. As the nature and functions of the etheric body of man assume their rightful place in the thought of the world, and as it is realized that the etheric is the most important of the 2 physical bodies, man will be brought into closer conscious contact with the other evolutions that evolve in etheric matter, just as he does in a dense physical body. There are certain large groups of devas called the devas of the shadows, or the violet devas, who are closely allied with the evolutionary development of man's etheric body, and who transmit to him solar and planetary radiation. The etheric body of man receives prana in different ways and of different kinds, and all these ways bring him into touch with varying entities.
Thank you. Okay, first, it's clear to esotericists that the etheric is the most important of the 2 physical bodies, but only really a tiny group of people in the West recognize this fact. One definite avenue of change will come when, through the impact of the coming Aquarian energies, more and more people begin to see etherically. Since their experiences will reveal a common reality, common that is among those who develop etheric vision, it will only take a small percentage of the population to instill recognition of their collective data on the world thinkers through the ability, for example, to diagnose medical diseases by seeing the etheric counterpart of a disease, literally being able to see etherically the source of a disease, or to determine the nature of a psychological problem through a study of the energetic emanation of the chakras. Next, man will be brought into closer conscious contact with the other evolutions that evoke in etheric matter, that evolve in etheric matter, just as he does in a sense, in a dense physical body. This phrase suggests evolutions that don't physically manifest, and thus introduces the next sentence on the devas of the shadows, or violet devas. Since DK details this group in the next couple of pages, I won't quote those passages here. But later in TCF, he tells us that the violet devas are evolutionary and that their primary sphere of influence is the fourth physical etheric, which, you know, all the etheric bodies of all the kingdoms and natures exist only on the fourth. In humankind, it exists on all four levels. And so you have four grades of violet devas, you know, from a radiant, light, pale, violet deva on the atomic subplane all the way down to a dense violet on the fourth subplane. MDR adds, it is important to note that these violet devas transmit to man both solar and planetary radiation. Their color violet allies them to the seventh ray, just as the etheric body is generically allied to the seventh ray. Okay, finally, the etheric body of man receives prana in different ways and of different kinds. And all these ways bring him into touch with varying entities, very general statement. So far, DK has described solar and planetary prana. Solar prana is received through the head, a center between the shoulder blades, and both the etheric and physical spleens. Planetary prana through the pores of the skin. To this, we can add the fact that these two types of prana and their means of reception are facilitated by various devic beings. Next up, a section on solar prana. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes, Fred, can you read? Okay.
That's all right. Sometimes it takes Fred a minute to be able to unmute, etc. You there, Fred? Well,
Okay.
maybe come back.
Joe.
I am here,
Great. Could you read for us?
surely. One, solar prana. This is that vital and magnetic fluid which radiates from the sun and which is transmitted to man's etheric body through the agency of certain deva entities of a very high order and of a golden hue. It is passed through their bodies and emitted as powerful radiations, which are applied direct through certain plexi in the uppermost part of the etheric body, the head and shoulders, and passed down to the etheric correspondence of the physical organ, the spleen, and from thence forcibly transmitted into the spleen itself. These golden-hued pranic entities are in the air above us and are especially active in such parts of the world as California, in those tropical countries where the air is pure and dry, and the rays of the sun are recognized as being especially beneficial. Relations between man and this group of devas are very close, but fraught as yet with much danger to man. These devas are of a very powerful order, and along their own line are further evolved than man himself.
Thank you. Okay, if this seems familiar, it's because we read this passage a couple of webinar sessions ago. First, this is that vital and magnetic fluid which radiates from the sun and which is transmitted to man's etheric body through the agency of certain deva entities of a very high order and of a golden hue. This is clearly a much more evolved group than the violet devas that we were just reading about. We have some idea of what these golden devas might look like through the extraordinary work of Jeffrey Hodson, though it must be noted that he didn't paint any pranic devas per se. Depicted here is a healing deva here on the left and a deva of music on the right. But they have that golden hue quality of this level of devic consciousness. So these great beings step down vital and magnetic fluid in such a way that we are able to assimilate this energy. We might assume that this happens when this energy, quote unquote, passes through their bodies and are emitted as powerful radiations. In other words, we couldn't get this directly from the sun itself. This is a very necessary intermediate step, this entire dedicated group of devas that work ceaselessly for our benefit. Okay, this vital or pranic fluid has its origin in the Akashic on cosmic etheric levels. This passage traces, that's up here. This passage traces its descent. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, I'll try Fred again.
You there yet, Fred?
It seems he is unable to click the unmute when I ask him to unmute. I don't have this session open just in case people come in and we don't know them. So I'm just asking people to unmute. So when Fred's up, okay. Now, Fred, you can click unmute. I change the security settings.
On the far left of your key of your of the pop-up toolbar, you have a mute, unmute microphone icon. Just click on it.
Yeah, I have you in the list, Yvonne.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Kira, can you read?
It is the Akasha. It is the Akasha. On the higher planes, it is the agent of the great entity who wields the cosmic law of gravitation in its relation to our solar system, whilst on the lower planes, it demonstrates as the astral light, the great agent of reflection that fixes and perpetuates on its vibratory bosom the past, the present, and the future, or that which we call time. In direct relation to the lower vehicle, it manifests as electricity, prana, and the magnetic fluid.
So this traces the descent of this energy from its highest source. Okay, but where does its fluidic nature come from? Why is it a magnetic fluid? We get a clue from Esoteric Psychology 1. I mean, the first volume. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Kirsten.
One point of interest might here be noted. It is known esoterically that the vegetable kingdom is the transmitter and the transformer of the vital pranic fluid to the other forms of life on our planet. That is its divine and unique function. This pranic fluid, in its form of the astral light, is a reflector of the divine akasha. The second plane, therefore, reflects itself in the astral plane.
Thank you. So this passage suggests that prana's naturally fluidic nature is reflected through the astral plane from the akasha, second up from the bottom and the second down from the top, into the etheric, which may be one reason that a couple of pages back, DK stresses the etheric body's quote unquote most important link with the astral plane. The next phrase details the three human organs of receptions. One, certain plexi in the uppermost part of the etheric body, the head and shoulders. Two, the etheric spleen, and three, the spleen itself, which translates the energy into the physical spleen. In esoteric astrology, we learned that this threefold means of reception is called the pranic triangle. Okay. The fact that prana has to be forcibly transmitted to the physical spleen seems to indicate that it is difficult for the dense physical body to assimilate such energy. All right, next up, we have a list of the conditions and locales in which these pranic entities are most active. Kudos to all you Californians. I grew up there myself. In fact, Mikhail and I were just talking about how cool it was to live in California. Of course, we have to assume that these pranic devas are active to some degree everywhere, since they're an essential element for human existence. Next, relations between man and this group of devas are very close, but fraught as yet with much danger to man. We can view this closeness between the two in terms of each and every human being's connection with the pranic devas to sustain their existence, right? Remember, he says they're in the atmosphere above us. So when we step outside, we are in direct connection with these pranic devas. But also in terms of the relationship between the human kingdom as a whole with this potent group of pranic devas as a whole. In both cases, their continuing radiatory service enables human beings to incarnate. These solar pranic devas, we learn in the next sentence, are more highly evolved than humanity, suggesting that they must be self-conscious beings. In the next passage, we learn why our connection with these devas is fraught with danger. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes, Maria.
Okay. Unprotected man lies at their mercy. And in this lack of protection and man's failure to understand the laws of magnetic resistance or of solar repulsion comes, for instance, the menace of sunstroke. When the etheric body and its assimilative processes are comprehended scientifically, man will then be immune from dangers due to solar radiation. He will protect himself by the application of the laws governing magnetic repulsion and attraction, and not so much by clothing and shelter. It is largely a question of polarization. One hint might be here given. When men understand the diva evolution somewhat more correctly and recognize their work along certain lines in connection with the sun, and realize that they represent the feminine pole as they themselves represent the masculine, the fourth creative hierarchy being male, they will comprehend the mutual relationship and govern that relationship by law.
So sunstroke, sunburn, which can manifest as severely as second-degree burns. And as we now know, melanoma or skin cancer are some of the dangers of overexposure to these Davic energies. Of course, physical science sees it as just the rays of the sun, but we're here being told that it is really an overexposure to prana that creates these conditions. Next, decay indicates the real reason for these problems. Man's failure to understand the laws of magnetic resistance or of solar repulsion. We learned earlier that prana is a, quote, vital and magnetic fluid which radiates from the sun. So it makes sense that we have to learn and be able to apply the laws of magnetic resistance in order to regulate the amount of prana that we receive. This would require the ability to manipulate energy. Etheric vision would be useful in learning to resist or neutralizing pranic energy. Next, when the etheric body and its assimilative processes are comprehended scientifically, man will then be immune from dangers due to solar radiation. Well, as part of the scientific comprehension, we'll also have to develop the technique of solar repulsion, which in the next sentence DK describes as the application of the laws governing magnetic repulsion and attraction. Let's take this final passage as a whole. It's largely a question of polarization. One hint might here be given. When men understand the Deva evolution somewhat more correctly and recognize their work along certain lines in connection with the sun and realize that they represent the feminine pole as they themselves represent the masculine pole, the fourth creative hierarchy being male, they will comprehend the mutual relationship and govern that relationship by law. So, the Deva kingdom is feminine and thus negatively polarized in relation to the masculine human kingdom. This, we're told, is a magnetic polarity. Science tells negative being the feminine aspect and positive being the masculine aspect. Science tells us that part of every magnetic interaction is deflective. That's built in to the process of magnetic interaction. So possibly learning to control this deflective aspect would be part of the, quote, governing of that relationship by law. Any thoughts or questions? Of course, the magnetic interrelations governing these two groups is certainly more complex than this simple model, but at least it gives us somewhere to start with. Well, I see hands. Great.
Yvonne?
Unmute. Is there a law of protection for one of her laws in the back of the book? I mean, there's so many of them, but is there one for this specific purpose? You could use this law to protect yourself, even though you don't have etheric vision, you do it by intention.
Yeah, you can. You know, it would just be, eventually etheric vision would facilitate it because you could see the results of your efforts. But, manipulating energy is a fundamental and esoteric work. All of a treatise on white magic is about basically the manipulation of energy. So learning to repulse that, what is this natural flow from the negative to the positive, right? Learning to repulse that at a certain point when enough has been received would be a function of that of energy manipulation. And yeah, the law of repulsion is a law listed in esoteric psychology too. It's a first ray kind of type of law. So
Thank you.
yeah, anyone else?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Joe,
Yeah. Joe?
I think I clicked.
I have to unmute. I'm looking at this diagram and it's really quite exciting. I started to count the arrows. I think there are 10 on top, probably 10 on the bottom.
Now, don't
But
put too much in that. This is, I didn't Google, magnetism of the Davican human kingdom because you don't, you can't get there from here, not in Google. This is just a general model of the way magnetism works. However, I think there definitely has to be a correlation, even though it's not magnetism of the physical plane. And I'm not sure that the number of arrows has any particular relevance. It might, but I don't know.
I'll stay general then and would comment on the meeting place between.
Yeah.
I wonder if that is identical with that shoulder area that was referred to in the reading a little earlier.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, these series of arrows, I think, represent the response. From another point of view, you could have these arrows pointing down because, the positive is receiving from the negative pole. That's one reason this model isn't accurate for, what we're discussing. And so the repulsing, hang on, you asked a very specific question there. Well, say again what you asked.
Sorry, I've got airplanes going over. I couldn't hear you.
I said, would you restate your question?
I'm thinking that the center point between the two, the up and the down, yes, I can see it would go maybe arrows both directions if one learned to repulse the energy coming in from above.
Right.
But I'm thinking that it has something to do with something that's sometimes called the higher heart chakra, or it's right there at the thyroid almost, that area.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. You asked about that. Yeah, it's the head center, a place between the shoulder blades, as well as the splenic, the two spleens, etheric. Of course, the first two are completely etheric. And I would guess, I'm glad you brought this up because I hadn't thought about it, but I would guess that the repulsion would come through the head center because it's through the mind that one formulates the effect of repulsion. And then you could possibly engage that what is just described as a center between the shoulder blades. You could probably also activate that as a repulsing agency. But, he doesn't give us specific information about that. But, I think it's a good hypothesis.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're not going to be repulsing from the spleen because it's not a center where you can activate the will so much like the head center would be. That's just how it occurs to me.
Well, we're boring, I think. Okay,
is.
thank you.
There it is, yeah. So MDR gives us some additional thoughts on this idea and some cool ideas. So could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Mary Ann, can you read?
Just as a relationship between the sexes is under growing Libran influence to be governed increasingly by law, so is the relationship between man and devas. The principle of mutuality based on respect and understanding must govern. We are dealing here with the harmonization of the human and Deva kingdoms. The incycling of the fourth ray of harmony through conflict and its Buddhic associations will assist with this harmonization under law. In these days of relatively ignorant experimentation by man as he enters into fully association with the Devas, he is not governed in this approach by law.
Okay, so the first 2 points that he makes here give us hints as to ways that we might employ this repulsion, right? You know, the law of repulsion, it doesn't sound like an integrating principle, but in fact, it's learning to control the flow of energy between Devas and humanity, right? And it's interesting, I find that it recognizes that this is a part of the Libran influence. Of course, Libra, opposite of Aries, is governed by the law of balance and of law, and not just the outer laws of humanity, but the inner laws, including these laws of repulsion. And learning this inherent balance available through the Libran energy, I would think would be a very natural way of approaching this this association between man and Devas. And then he brings up this fourth ray of harmony through conflict. You have the two poles, harmony and conflict. You know, as it exists now, it's conflictual. You know, whenever you have a negative result from an association, you could call it conflictual. You know, again, harmony and Libran influence are very much connected. And to achieve harmony through higher understanding of this ray force would also be a means of being able to manipulate this law of repulsion. Of course, none of that tells us any kind of specific techniques, but it's it's hints into how it might be approached. Okay, one last point on this. Embedded in this passage, we have, when men recognize their work along certain lines in connection with the sun, there being the pranic devas, they will comprehend the mutual relationship and govern that relationship by law. So what is this work, quote unquote, along certain lines in connection with the sun? We get some clues from this passage later in a treatise on cosmic fire. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah. Miri, can you read?
Sure. 3 types of force, therefore, play upon or through these devas. That energizing the devas of construction, or the form-building groups. This comes from the second aspect of Brahma, and is prana, issuing from the physical sun and working under the law of attraction.
Thank you. So at least one aspect of the pranic devas' work is to, as builders, wield prana in order to build the form aspect. We tend to think of prana as a vitalizing agent, but it is also the energy behind form building. In fact, it's how the solar system manifests on the outer planes. The two functions are related. In fact, we can view the act of vitalizing as a kind of rebuilding, right? So you have a, he calls it here the second aspect of Brahma, and then the vitalizing is a kind of Vishnu aspect because it's a sustaining quality. Okay, let's take a look at the footnote, which references, quote, the Deva kingdom represents the feminine pole as the human kingdom represents the masculine, the fourth creative hierarchy being male. The footnote itself reads, the whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by an almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings, each having a mission to perform. Among these, the hierarchy of human monads has a place. So before we get into it, let's pick up Robert's question or comment. Robert, you have your hand up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go back to that diagram of the magnetic relationship between the day? Yeah, that one. I think that this might be, and I know you touched on it before, but I think this might be too simplistic in the sense that because this makes it look like everything that the human kingdom does is positive toward the Deva kingdom. And we know that's not true because the Deva kingdom is constantly passing through energy. And so it's not just in a receptive form. I think that middle section, like if, let's say the top part where the Devas are receptive, and then the bottom part where the human is outgoing, the middle section maybe birth is a better example. For example, just thinking of it, that the human gives something to the Deva nurtures it, brings it to term, and then returns it back to the human kingdom.
That's interesting because that reminds me of DK's description of the connection between Venus and the Earth. And he talks about this phase in our connection, during this fourth chain and globe, that Venus seems to be one that's doing all the giving, but that in the total picture, Earth is actually the more dominant aspect in the pair, which is, I found really interesting.
Through its invocation, right? Through its needs, like in the building of the bodies.
Yeah.
Again, this stuff is so complex, but the human soul somehow communicates to the Devas, I need this for these bodies. And then the Devas are the builders, and then they return it to the human.
And you have to remember that the human soul itself is an angel. Deva and angel are the same. Just for general information to everyone, the Deva kingdom is the angelic kingdom, right? There's no difference. It's just except for in the way people look at those two kingdoms. People who recognize the Deva kingdom tend to be more occult and have an ancient wisdom take on it. The angel kingdom tends to be more Christian, but in reality, it's the same people, the same entities. So a solar angel is its own kind of builder, but you're right, it would have under its purview these building devas on etheric levels that would then form the oversee and form the actual etheric vehicles, but beyond that would then sustain them through prana prana as both a building and a sustaining agency. So yeah, it's, I'm glad you brought this up, because it would all be controlled through through the soul aspect, in its will to live, that is, in its incarnating, that's one of its fundamental purposes, is to send a fragment of itself, so to speak, into materiality in order to gather experience and eventually create a form of self-realization. All the outer part of that, all the bodies involved in that, are made possible through Davic building and Davic sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other comment, or do you want to focus in on another aspect of that?
Well, also interesting is when he just talked before about the danger, of the contact with certain kinds of things. If we see the human kingdom or an individual human as using the soul of that individual human or the hierarchy, we can have that as the mediator between the human kingdom and the Davic kingdom safely. Whereas if we try to do it, or a human being tries to do it through its lower forms or bodies that are not of the soul in the same way, that's where the danger lies.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it really has to do with quality of energy. And if you remember, these pranic devas are this, literally more highly evolved than the human kingdom, which is coming up, I think. And therefore, trying to deal with them strictly from the physical point of view is not really the way. It would be, because their energy is also of that high form. It's stepped down. Really, they're transformers of solar, of solar prana, in such a way that we can benefit from, and also he doesn't say this, but that we can take it, that we can handle it. It's like also probably a potency step down that allows us to, and also they focalize it specifically for our reception.
And maybe this is the last thing I'll say, but maybe the Deva kingdom can be seen in a symbolic way as the mothers of the new age, that kingdom. And that's why they're part of that process of bringing in the new world.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, especially the fact that they're completely group identified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and which is our goal in the Aquarian age. It's really it's the number one point of becoming in order to become Aquarians. So yeah. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe and Yvonne has a question.
Okay.
Well, she did. We'll see if she comes back.
I see her hand raised. Joe, go ahead if you have a question or a comment.
Question.
You cut out.
Is the vitalization, and the fifth has correlated to the builders.
Is the vitalization and what?
If all human beings.
Oh gosh, you're fading out.
Okay.
Joe, you're being cut off, so maybe
just say it again. Just say it again. Try it again.
I'll try again. I wonder, I'm not speaking about the same thing that Robert was speaking about now. I'm going on to the last thing that we were speaking about, that you were speaking about, the builders, and wondering if the builders correlate with the third plane, the first mental that's beyond the physical.
Yes, is the short answer. You have devas that construct on all levels of the cosmic physical plane. So you would specifically have devas that would weave the elementals into the the mental form aspect, right? Devas that would be overseeing. There'd be a much higher group of devas than that which constructs the etheric body. But they would be constructing the mental body and mental substance, thought forms, etc. They would be manipulating the elemental lives in order to construct at that level. There is no place on the cosmic physical plane that isn't built by the Devic kingdom.
Okay, so there is an ascending and descending order.
Oh, sure there is.
Yeah.
There is a descending and ascending order. You would have great beings that work on monadic levels that would be building the form aspect of that plane, and all the way down. He doesn't talk much about that level, but certainly Devic substance is part and parcel with the fact of the cosmic physical plane. It's a physical plane, and the devas create physicality.
I think my bottom line is I'm correlating it to our own human systems, on up through the crown.
Right. Okay. Well, remember, we ourselves are sevenfold,
Right.
and all the way up. And all of those, all the form aspects of those would be built with the help of the Bohat of that plane, the electric qualities of those planes, and the elements involved with those planes, like air is connected with the Buddhic plane, fire with the mental plane. All of those elements, elementals, and Devic overseeing would be involved in building the sevenfold human being, right? There's no place that they're not involved in that.
Yes, right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Francis, maybe you could, I put something in chat about negative ions just to go over the idea of negative positive concept between the male and the female feminine, since it's maybe seems negative positive, and it's not like that.
Right. Yeah, I don't know too much about that, but every system that involves a negative and positive, all electricity, is made manifest through a negative and positive polarity. So this is the realm of duality. You could say that fundamentally devas are the negative pole of that realm of duality. That's why we have, two kingdoms that, two fundamental kingdoms, the Devic and the human kingdoms. The lesser kingdoms beneath the human, animal, plant, and mineral are actually those who are evolving towards the human kingdom. But in the same way that we have fire and water as the two fundamental elements, and that's on causal or noumenal levels, you also have these two kingdoms as the fundamental polarity. So every way and every form of interaction between negative and positive polarity is going to have its correspondence in these two kingdoms, So yeah, thanks for popping that in the chat.
And then Yvonne's hands up.
Yvonne.
Okay, a couple of things. On this Venus and Earth, and I did some research on that, and really, Earth was the bigger giver, and that's
Yeah.
what was positive, and Venus was the receiver, even though Venus gave us the gift of mind. And I don't know what the gift was that Earth gave, but if you remember, I think I wrote something on this, that Earth was the bigger giver. And
Yeah.
an way to remember this, as far as humanity, you go, Deva Kingdom and the angelic, the Deva Kingdom, the humanity kingdom is the one is Deva is the reception, feminine, and that's the feminine, and now the positive is mind, manas, and God.
Yeah.
First ray is mind, it's masculine. So, that's easy to accept. And also, as far as all the different levels of devas, when you're creating, and this is in white magic too, and you're creating on like the astral plane, you create in the physical plane all the time, whether you're realizing or not. But if
Yeah.
you're consciously creating and you don't use certain mantras, or your solar angel is not protecting you, these Agnosurians on the astral plane are not human friendly.
Right, exactly.
They can actually destroy you, You
Yeah.
have to be very careful with working with energy. So
Exactly. Yeah. And in fact, there are many fates worse than death. And opening yourself to some of these, as you mentioned, the Agni Chaitans, all this is in Treatise on Cosmic Fire. If we have long enough time together to get to these passages, we'll be studying all this material.
yeah,
But-
and it's mostly the astral plane, the Agnosurians, as you're taking the thought form
Right.
from the mental onto the astral. But there's all sorts of things where you protect yourself and your solar angel
Right.
to recite these mantras. So you can't take this lightly, but it's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, to your comment about the Venus Earth thing, one of the reason I think that there seems to be more weighted as the Venus as the giver at this time is because of their advancement. They're about a full chain or full round, at least a full round. Now I'm unclear on that. I think they're a full chain ahead of us, which is going to put them in that position of being the providers. But when the two schemes in balance are associated, as you said, Earth is the greater giver in that sense. He doesn't say as much about that, but right. So thank you. Also, I'll just say that Treatise on White Magic, I read it a couple of times. It scared the hell out of you. The first thing I get when I read that is, I'm not going to be doing any of this magic, until I'm compelled by my soul to do it, because it's, the idea of doing unguided, unguarded magical processes, it makes it real clear just how dangerous that is in no unspecific terms. It really tells you right down to what will happen if you do that. See a couple of hands.
Yeah, Robert.
I just want to say, in terms of the Venus Earth thing, Earth gave Venus the opportunity to do that implantation of mind, because for all we know, Venus was scurrying around the universe looking for a person to do that with. Just that you think of a man or woman having a child, that opportunity has to be presented to the masculine energy. Otherwise, and that's on a metaphysical level, a really big gift. And I was also thinking there are some really wonderful spiritual books about midwives, like spiritual midwifery, if anybody's seen that. And a woman who's pregnant and sensitive frequently has very, very psychic kinds of experiences, perceptions of colors and energies. That happened to my wife when she was pregnant. And I think that what we're talking about, there must be devas hanging around all the time, being of assistance to that process. And I've really never seen that mentioned else. I'm sure it is, but I've just never seen it.
Yeah, also you could add to that the fact that there is a being coming from the higher mental levels, that it is passing downwards through the planes, picking up its various bodies through the permanent atoms to finally be born. And the mother, is certainly going to sense that higher energies that her child is bearing into her womb.
Yeah, the soul and the builders. So,
Yeah.
which is what makes it such a profound experience if somebody's open.
Yeah, with the last caveat there that, especially if you're a student of esoteric sciences, there's a lot that can be, that you can connect in with through the experience of being pregnant and giving birth. It's not something you or I will ever have any opportunity to experience, but, we can do it by proxy through those who we love. Anyone else?
Yeah, well, no.
We there? Okay. All right, so the 7 pages referenced here, among other things, describe the nature of those hierarchies who have assisted humanity. So, he often, I'm finding, is, footnoting long tracks in Secret Doctrine. This would take us like 3 or 4 webinars to get through if we were actually to read all of this. So what I do is I go through the pages and find what I think is the most specific information pertaining to what we've been discussing. And in this case, that is really one condensed paragraph. I could have given much more, but we can't go too far afield here. This is HPB and really her last days of writing the Secret Doctrine. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Nasa, can you read?
Who did you ask?
Nasa.
Nasa. Are you out there? You're not on mute? They're on your far left. There's a microphone icon with a line through it. Just click it.
Go to Robert.
Okay.
Many are those among the spiritual entities who have incarnated bodily in man since the beginning of his appearance, and who, for all that, still exist as independently as they did before in the infinitudes of space. To put it more clearly, the invisible entity may be bodily present on Earth without abandoning, however, its status and functions in the supersensuous regions.
Thanks, Robert. So next in the, that was just to give you a taste of these pages here described. And of course, it's talking about those beings from higher hierarchies that can actually overshadow a human being. So we have this quote from later in the Secret Doctrine included in the footnote, which is the whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by an almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings, each having a mission to perform. And finally, what appears to be an additional comment from DK, since it has no assignation, among these, the hierarchy of human monads has a place. Okay. We are accustomed to thinking in terms of the 12 hierarchies associated with the present and past incarnations of our solar system. Rarely do we see a comment about the quote endless series of hierarchies that make up the entire cosmos. MDR says, the planes do not end at the third subplane of the cosmic astral plane as the tabulation of hierarchies ends. So what he's saying here is that these highest levels of hierarchies, it only goes up to this level of the third subplane of the cosmic astral plane. That's the highest that our hierarchies go up to. So he's saying it doesn't end there. The ascending hierarchies are virtually limitless as far as man is concerned. So, you know, the hierarchies beyond this, going up higher, are virtually limitless. There are also many orderly subdivisions within the hierarchies listed. For example, you know, the hierarchies that concern humanity, the fourth, fifth, and sixth are, the fourth and fifth, for instance, are dual. They contain, you know, the fifth contains both the personality aspect and the soul aspect. It's a very mysterious hierarchy. And so there are many subdivisions within these hierarchies. That's his comment. I would add that every solar system has its own hierarchies, which might be on parallel levels of development, but are definitely not the same as the 12 hierarchies that make up all life in this and the previous solar system. So, you know, if you look out at the night sky, or you look at some of the images from the new outer space telescope, what is it, David Webb, is that what it's called? Something like that. You'll see that there's trillions upon trillions, quintillions really, of solar systems out there, and that they all have their hierarchical, just by the fact that they exist in physical space, not only suggests but affirms that they have their own hierarchies, right? Okay, next up, could we get a reader on this final paragraph on solar prana?
Yes. And it's a James Webb Telescope. I'll put the link.
Oh, thanks.
And
David, that's another Webb, James Webb. Okay. If you haven't explored the photos that have come through this, it's recently released. It's this amazing photo of Jupiter. I'm sure many of you saw it. It's extraordinary. Okay.
Yvonne.
These solar devas take the radiatory rays of the sun, which reach from its center to the periphery along one of the three channels of approach, pass them through their organism and focalize them there. They act almost as a burning glass acts. These rays are then reflected or transmitted into man's etheric body and caught up by him and again assimilated. When the etheric body is in good order and functioning correctly, enough of this prana is absorbed to keep the form organized. This is the whole object of the etheric body's functioning, and is a point which cannot be sufficiently emphasized. The remainder is cast off in the form of animal radiation or physical magnetism, all terms expressing the same idea. Man therefore repeats on a lesser scale the work of the great solar devas, and in his turn adds his quota of repolarized or remagnetized emanation to the sum total of the planetary aura.
Thank you. Okay, first, these solar devas take the radiatory rays of the sun, which reach from its center to the periphery along one of the three channels of approach, pass them through their organism and focalize them there. focalize them there. Note how DK teaches by adding information to that which he's already given. For example, we already know that solar devas pass solar rays through their bodies, but now we learned that these rays reach from the sun's center to the periphery along one of the three channels of approach. We'll learn in this next quote that the periphery is the furthest extent of the sun's sphere of influence. It's a ring past naught. DK lists these three channels of approach earlier in TCF. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Andrea.
There exists in the sun, in the planet, in man, and in the atom, a central point of heat, or if I might use so limiting and inappropriate a term, a central cavern of fire, or nucleus of heat. And this central nucleus reaches the bounds of its sphere of influence, its ring past naught, by means of a threefold channel. 1, the akasha, itself vitalized matter, or substance animated by latent heat. 2, electricity, substance of one polarity, the opposite pole to planetary electrical fluid, and energized by one of the three aspects logoic. To express it more occultly, substance showing forth the quality of the cosmic Lord, whose energy it is. 3, light rays of pranic aspect, some of which are being now recognized by the modern scientist. They are but aspects of the latent heat of the sun as it approaches the earth by a particular line of least resistance.
Okay, the first thing to notice here is all these are substantive, from this very high level of vitalized matter or substance, right, down to this pranic level. So of course, the channel taken by the pranic devas is light rays of pranic aspect, right? Okay, next up. When the etheric body is in good order and functioning correctly, enough of this prana is absorbed to keep the form organized. This is the whole object of the etheric body's functioning, and is a point which cannot be sufficiently emphasized. So this suggests an energetic organization, that is a free-flowing interchange of pranic energy that keeps all aspects of the form functioning harmoniously. So we know that prana builds, organizes, and vitalizes the form aspect by means of the etheric body that holds it in position, channels its energy through its many tubular channels, as it's described in one part of the text. Next, the remainder is cast off in the form of animal radiation or physical magnetism, all terms expressing the same idea. Little reminder here that we're in animal bodies. Technically, this is human prana, what he's talking about here, also called etheric radiation. As we learned from the charts on page 82, and this etheric radiation is felt, we're told, in a human being's environment, as described in this final statement. Man, therefore, repeats on a lesser scale the work of the great solar devas, and in his turn adds his quota of repolarized and remagnetized emanation to the sum total of the planetary aura. MDR adds that prana, which is cast off from man due to non-absorption, has been repolarized or remagnetized and is an emanation adding to the sum total of the planetary aura. The receiving entity requalifies that which is received. Any thoughts or questions about this process? Every sentient entity that stands in the path of solar pranic radiation is replenished by that and then casts off the residue of that prana. Okay, that was it on solar prana. Now we're moving to planetary prana. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes. And we're at an hour and a half.
Well, we
Almost.
got an hour 45.
Okay. And Veronica?
Second, planetary prana. This is the vital fluid emanated from any planet which constitutes its basic coloring or quality and is produced by repetition within the planet of the same process, which is undergone in connection with man and solar prana. The planet, the Earth or any other planet, absorbs solar prana, assimilates what is required, and radiates off that which is not essential to its well-being in the form of the planetary radiation. Planetary prana, therefore, is solar prana, which has passed throughout the planet, has circulated through the planetary etheric body, has been transmitted to the dense physical planet, and has been cast off thence in the form of a radiation of the same essential character as solar prana, plus the individual and distinctive quality of the particular planet concerned. This again repeats the process undergone in the human body. The physical radiation of men differ according to the quality of the physical bodies. So it is with the planet.
Okay, a lot of cool information here. First up, this is the vital fluid emanated from any planet which constitutes its basic coloring or quality and is produced by repetition within the planet of the same process which is undergone in connection with man and solar prana. So, DK continues the analogy. Its basic coloring or quality would include that planet's ray makeup, what chain and round the planetary logos is demonstrating through, and its cosmic level of advancement, just to name a few qualifiers, right? MDR says, for instance, the first ray passing through Saturn and then emanated is qualified differently from the first ray passing through Vulcan and then emanated. A quality of the recipient organism is added. In the flow of life, there is no unnecessary retention of energy. Health demands circulation. It's a really cool comment. Any thoughts or questions about any of this? Next, we have the planet, the Earth or any other planet, absorbs solar prana, assimilates what is required, and radiates off that which is not essential to its well-being in the form of planetary radiation. This is a perfect example of the law of economy at work. There is no waste. That which is cast off is utilized by the lesser lives. We are greatly nourished by planetary prana, right? So there's a stepping down. Of course, there's that astonishing fact that we also receive solar prana, not just planetary prana, right? And then there are those beings who, and he describes this later on, who are receivers of our cast off prana, right? It goes into the animal and the vegetable kingdom and how all the prana is received and who is the recipient of cast off prana from these higher levels. It's really astonishing. So next up, planetary prana, therefore, is solar prana, which has passed through the planet, has circulated through the planetary etheric body, has been transmitted to the dense physical planet, and has been cast off thence in the form of a radiation of the same essential character as solar prana. That's a very important line. It's not, solar prana does not disappear. It is carried and colored through planetary prana. It's the same essential character as solar prana, plus the individual and distinctive quality of the particular planet concerned. So, planet is one link in a long chain of pranic transmission from those highest cosmic sources that initiate the flow of, on presumably cosmic akashic levels, down to an atom of substance whose pranic emanations vitalize the body of which it is a constituent part. A particular interest here is the idea that pranic fluid does not remain neutral, but is rather colored, quote, by the distinctive quality of the particular planet concerned. Seems to me that this coloration would dramatically affect all the kingdoms of nature within a particular planetary scheme. Any thoughts or questions about this material? I see Yvonne's hand. Oh, another.
Yvonne.
I just wanted to say this last sentence, the physical radiations of men differed according to the quality of their physical bodies. So what are we radiating?
Exactly. You can ask yourself that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, you abuse your body, you eat poorly, you're going to have a different quality of radiation. And also, the physical body is an effect. It is just an effect of, you could say, our etheric body's health, right? And so that's the regulating of the centers of energy within the etheric body. This is, occult biology, really. But it comes through all, the physical discipline, certainly, but also through meditation and service, that those chakras are regulated. Eating sprouts is not going to, just eating sprouts isn't going to do it, right? There's a whole level of discipline that is going to determine the quality of the physical body. Good Lord, what just happened? Well, I just got spun over to Photoshop for some reason. All right. The computer takes over. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that forth. In the same way that, and you could also say on a, rather than a better or worse level, you can also say that the quality of the physical body, or I should say of the physical radiations, would be determined by the rays of your physical sheath, as well as all your other sheaths. So, what all this information he gives about a planet is equally applicable to a human being. Okay,
Robert.
I'm a little confused about this that sentence about has been cast off thence in the form of a radiation. Is this a twofold process whereby prana comes into the planet and then it takes what it needs to function and be in good health, and then radiates its own form of it? Or are we talking about a waste product?
Both. It's the same
both.
thing.
Okay.
It's the same thing. In other words, that which it casts off is its own pranic radiation, right? And the reason it's called, is it's described as being cast off is because it has a pejorative quality to the term, but it's not really refuse in the same way, as human refuse, or it's really just the prana that the leftover prana from what is absorbed, and that leftover prana, which has the same essential quality as the prana that comes in, is then added to by the prana of the radiating body.
That's where I get a little confused. That idea of leftover prana, because like clearly human and animal waste fertilizes the vegetable kingdom. So that it's not, in that sense, the vegetable kingdom doesn't see it as waste product. It sees it as
exactly. It's not a waste product.
So therefore, is there some of this prana that enters into the planet is used by the physical planet and then is radiated out to serve as a kind of, as if there's a radiated prana that does one thing, and then there's a waste product that does another thing. That's, I guess.
No, I don't think so. I don't think, not in terms of prana. I think it's the same thing. There is no real waste product that because that suggests, that it's unusable, by the lesser recipients. And I don't, he makes no indication that exists. He suggests that everything that radiates, let me pull up this, where are we here? We're at 91. So, okay, go back here. Do you remember there were like 4 charts that describe this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we have surface radiation or emanation for each type. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prana is received, and then you have this surface radiation, and then you have the effect of that radiation and where that effect is felt or experienced. In the case of a human being, it's felt in its total environment. In other words, our own pranic radiations affect all those around us, and it would suggest all the lesser kingdoms in nature as well, right? That they're specifically affected by human prana. It's not experienced by them as a waste product, but really as a source of vitality.
Well, I think by bringing this up, you're making the point there, because there are 2 categories. There's surface radiation or emanation, health aura. That's energy that could be felt by a neighboring person, and then distributive effect, which is, there's a difference between those 2.
Right. Let me come on board with you there. Yeah, it's interesting.
Because that's what I'm saying, that what we see as excrement, the rose bush sees as spiritual energy. So there's obviously a place for everything in the creation.
Yeah, I think that's true, and that's true for prana as well.
Like when Michael's earlier thing where it said the prana that is absorbed, but then that which is non-absorbed is passed through. So I was trying to think of the analogy when we eat food, we don't take in more food than we need. We take in the food, the body processes it, so that that's where I got a little confused. You see where it says cast due to non-absorption. My question was, is it due to non-absorption, or is it an after, a product of the absorption? Not that, I'm sure nobody cares, but it just kind of stuck in my head.
I think it's two ways of saying the same thing. First of all, kudos to you that you never take in more food than you need. You're actually the only person I've ever met that that's true of.
But when you're a glutton, there's no limit, so it's fine.
Yeah, but this idea of non-absorption and and the idea of waste and the idea of radiated prana of the entity are all in a sense the same thing. And it's described. He describes it that that higher form, if it's a planet, then the higher form is going to be the solar prana. Doesn't lose its essential character, but it is repolarized and remagnetized. And part of that is probably necessary so that it can be received by lesser beings. For instance, the prana of the earth, there's probably many entities on a planet, we'll just say the earth, that aren't capable of receiving solar prana directly and depend on planetary prana for their sustenance, their vitality.
Mm-hmm. That's incredibly complex chain and very interesting, obviously. I'll have to talk to the Devas who are in charge of this chain. Maybe they can help us to understand what it is they do.
Yeah, and we're going to be reading about Devas for a while, so hopefully this will come into more clarity. Because yeah, you bet. I think the same thing is going to be true not just of pranic Devas, but this distributive method, I think, is probably more universal than just with prana. Okay, coming back here, play slideshow in window. Okay.
So one more question, I think, is Joe.
Yeah.
It's along the line of what you and Robert were talking about. I'm just thinking an even more synthesis. It feels to me like the earth receives the prana, it steps down to all the kingdoms. Simultaneously, this whole process is going on, but simultaneously also it is being radiated out to other entities, let's put it that way, planets for sure, but it goes farther than that.
Yeah, it goes all the way down. I mean, we're going to be getting into a section that describes how the animal and vegetable kingdoms radiate prana, and that they are received by a particular level of a very low level of violet deva that is almost gray, right? So it's really unending in terms of, probably all the way down to physical atoms who receive and emanate prana, as a result of this. The original source of all of it is solar prana, but even that is not really the original. It's the original in the solar system, but you have cosmic prana, which is received by the sun and steps down in its own emanation, and because it translates this great being who is the solar logos, probably the devas involved with him, really, step it down into solar prana, so the cosmic prana comes from very, very high sources, and it ends up feeding each individual atom of substance, but not directly, through all these transformations down the line, right? Okay, and that's going to be it for today. We're great conversation. I hope you're getting something from this.